So my topic today is going to be motivation. I guess I should give you a little bit of background about me. I've been teaching in Korea for about 16 years. I taught Hagwons initially, and I've been teaching the same university for about 14 years now. And when I first came to Korea, getting the students to respond in any way to an English person, white person, was a challenge. So I tried numerous things. I tried role plays, I tried games, I tried group activities. I had like 35 students, sometimes in a very small classroom, but we did all kinds of interesting things. But I found that the key point for me, the key issue for me was getting my students motivated. And for me, that was setting things like ground rules. They needed to know what I expected from them in the classroom. They needed to know what the rules were. They needed to know why certain things were important for them. So today what I'd like to do is first talk a little bit about the theory of motivation, and then we're going to look at some problems and discuss some solutions, and then I'll share with you some of my solutions, or the solutions that my friends may have had over the years. But the first thing I want you to do, I'm just going to try an experiment, I think. I'd like you to take out a pen and a piece of paper, or use the back of the hand, I don't care. I'd like you to write, first of all, what motivates you, and then what motivates your students, in your opinion. Write down those two lists. Maybe 3 or 4 things is fine. And then I'll just give you 5 minutes to share ideas with someone else before I do it.
What motivates you as a teacher?
Yes, okay. Exactly. All right, so turn to your closest neighbor, whether you know them or not, doesn't matter, and just share your list. I want to see And so, CPD and zone approximation.
They have to learn more business side, that's a benefit. They can have fun and they don't and I also want to make sure that exactly. They like competition too. Right. Some of them. Use an international program. And I guess we're still to change
That's the first question. Right, what do you think
two things.
It's the people. It's all about the students.
And the other one is sharing culture.
There are constant surprises.
For example,
You were a shy kid can be much more brilliant than you might think. Like some sleepy, disinterested, or very I thought you were like totally asleep. Has he had a chance to share yet?
You went on topic. Uh-oh. I'm sorry, who's bonus points and or other points?
I said the students. They're surprising me all the
I
time.
think students enjoy speaking music and just trying to use
On their lives, too. Did you hear the accent? No. I'm an American kid. Oregon. I don't know if you've ever heard of that place. It's the most beautiful state in the United States. Oregon Chamber of Commerce. He's from another state. I kind of apply.
All right, so I'd just like to start to cut off the conversation, but I'd like to share a few ideas, see if there's some similarities here or differences. So, what motivates you as a teacher? What motivates you? Give me some answers, some ideas here.
When I see my students engage in the topic, that really motivates me.
Okay.
If I see them, if I can see their confidence increased over time, I can see them trying.
So even if your English level isn't great, as long as their confidence is going up. Okay. Thank you. What else?
Me, also echo him, it's all about the student, and they surprise me. Quiet, shy student who seems disinterested, suddenly just, those
Blossoms
up.
and start speaking or whatever. Okay, yeah, one of those wonderful teacher moments, eureka moments. What else? Anything different that motivates them? Success.
You know, me being a good teacher, my students learning, and obviously mostly to my work. See that?
So how do you know you're a good teacher? I'm not trick question, I'm just asking. How do you know?
When the class succeeds, when you have a whole group of students, you present a lesson, the students get it, and you present it clearly, you present it well. You show mastery over what you can do.
Good, okay, so mastery is one aspect. Okay, good. Anything else that's important to you as a teacher?
For me, cosmopolitanism in the true sense of the word.
Okay, and how would you define the true sense of the word then?
As in like worldwide interaction and unity rather than just in the city. So through English, which is luckily my first language.
Interesting. And, well, I guess globalization, cosmopolitanism, that's sort of an overlap there, I suppose. And I don't know my students care that much about being cosmopolitan necessarily. They're more concerned about test.
They are, but I'm trying to.
But I can see the underlying aspect there, target and culture. All right, so for your students, what do you think your students are motivated by?
The test.
The test, or the tests, or whatever the tasks may be. Okay? So you have, what, typically 2 tests? Or do you have more? You have more quizzes, for example?
Not my test, they take the TOEIC.
Oh, okay, you mean the TOEIC test, the
Yeah,
standardized.
if I can help them in any way on that, they are motivated.
Then they're happy. And are your courses designed specifically to teach them?
No,
TOEIC?
it's conversation.
Conversation,
Yeah.
okay. But your university suggests or requires that you tie that to the TOEIC?
Yeah, they suggest that, yeah, if we want to,
They mentioned TOEIC a few times and your students are more interested. Yes. Or put TOEIC in the title of the class, that's even more motivating for them. Yes, so the test becomes more important than the language. The motivation is doing well in that test, that exam, whatever that assignment is. Okay, anything else that's important to your students?
My students like talking with each other.
Talking with each other?
Yeah.
In English, of course.
Well, that needs to be worked on sometimes, but no, they're talking with their friends or playing a game with their friends and trying to beat their friends in a simple game. It's not too simple, and also doing a partnership task successfully.
Okay.
So not one that's boring, this is easy to think about it, but thinking about it and succeeding.
Something that requires them to stretch
They
themselves.
feel good
or learn something.
if they succeed. They feel good.
So engagement and success through accomplishing a goal, overcoming an obstacle, doing well on a test, feeling success, and blossoming, I guess is the way I would put what you said, blossoming and getting the students to open up and be more comfortable in it. Okay, so a lot of those things certainly come up, and hopefully what I'm going to talk about is going to give you some ideas in that direction, at least initially in terms of the theory. But we need to go over some definitions and some concepts. So let me start with some quotes. If education is always to be conceived along the same antiquated lines of a mere transmission of knowledge from older people to younger people, there is little to be hoped for from it in the bettering of man's future. So is education simply a test? Is it simply a task? Is it simply accomplishing what I have taught you in this 16-week or whatever period of time? You accomplish that, you get the test, you do well on the test, you go have your vacation, you forget most of what I taught you, you come back and we start fresh next semester. I would hope not. But unfortunately, that's what that test-focused or test-driven curriculum that we have in Korea often accomplishes. So as native speakers, as native English speakers, our students often have different expectations. I don't know if you know Tim Thompson, who works at KAIST. He's done some really interesting research on expectations. Other people have done it as well, but expectations that Korean students have for Western teachers versus Korean teachers. And certainly, my students would pan out for this as well. The assumption is that Western teachers are more relaxed, we're more fun, we're more liberal, and we're more likely to accept those mistakes that students make. He's proved other things, but those are the things he's talked about. And the Korean professors tend to expect the correct answer, and they want certain things done a certain way. So students have different expectations and different motivations that ideally our classes can address. So I think that's what this quote kind of gets at, essentially. Next one. Time is a good teacher, but unfortunately it kills all of its students. We have a very limited period of time. I have 90 minutes twice a week with my students. Some of you probably have less time. Are you teaching in public schools, Paul? Yes. Okay, so you have how much? 45 minutes? 50 minutes?
I have a total from the upper grades 2 hours a week.
2 hours a week, divided into?
Well, 3 classes, 40 minutes each.
40 minutes each, okay. And that's all the time you have. And in that period of time, they're supposed to master English. They're supposed to become experts in English. It's a very short period of time. You've got to maximize what you're doing. You've got to use tasks and vary the ideas and things that you're throwing at them in such a way that it's stretching them, to develop them, not just in English, but in other ways. They need to know about the culture and other things as well. And my favorite quote, I know Murphy mentioned this morning, but Daniel Pink is something I've been focusing on a lot in my doctorate right now, more in organizational management and behavior, but he focuses on 3 things: autonomy, mastery, and purpose. So autonomy being independence. The students have control over what they're doing. They have a project, they have something they need to accomplish, give them the basic requirements, but how they get to that endpoint is up to them. And I don't tell my students a lot about my expectations. I tell them what I'm grading on, but I don't tell them what the output of this project is. So the project could be anything, as long as it satisfies the criteria I give them. And they often surprise me. They often go far beyond what I might expect them to do. I teach business communication and communication courses, and they have to design, for example, right now, I have a group of students, 3 groups of students, who are developing their own companies. And they're developing all their ideas, and I realize some of them are original, some of them aren't, but their requirements are very open. They have to do a team presentation, they have to give me portfolio materials, and they have to work on the concept. So they already presented their concept and were chosen. So they don't really know what I'm looking for. And honestly, I don't know what I'm looking for because I don't know what the outcome will be because it's a brand new course. I've never taught it before. And I told them that at the beginning. And I do that a lot with my students. I don't use a lot of tests. I use quizzes, I use journals, I use interviews, I use presentations, I use team presentations, I use debate, I use a variety of other things. But there are lots of ways that they can be evaluated, lots of ways they can produce things that don't necessarily boil down to those two exams twice a term. Mastery is, of course, how well you do something. We like to see our skills evolve over time. And he gives the example of playing the guitar, for example. Right? We're not all going to be famous rock musicians or whatever, but we like to see our evolution on a skill. And it might be job-related, it might not be job-related. But we want to be mastering that skill and see the evolution. As teachers, you're attending this conference. Presumably you want to learn some new ideas and become better teachers, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Such enthusiasm. No, I'm sorry. You're all wonderful teachers. You don't get me. And purpose. Why are you doing something? That's probably the most important thing. Teacher, why are we doing this? Because it's required by the class, required by the curriculum. Well, that's a horrible reason, isn't it? Because I want you to develop skills in this area. Because this is necessary. Because developing a company teaches you how to work in the business world. Sometimes teaching business in that case. I teach skills. So I develop discussion, debate skills, writing skills, interview skills, presentation skills, and then I'm doing communication, other things. And acting, I've done introduction to acting as well. So these are skills that they're developing. Life skills, not just something that applies to the classroom. So I'm very fortunate in that respect. So these are the things that are important. It's from business. So what he says are, what workers want are autonomy, mastery, and purpose, as long as they're being paid enough money. That's the key point. So for the students, I think it's more a question of, as long as they understand why they're doing something, the importance of what they're doing. It's very important to explain to them why we're doing this task. And most of the time, they follow along. So we have three different types of motive, or two different types, sorry. So we have motivation, the reason why you do something. And that may come from yourself, within yourself, your intrinsic motivation, or it may come from something external, the test, the curriculum, the demands of the university, whatever the case may be. So which of these is stronger, intrinsic or extrinsic? Intrinsic. Why?
Motivation point. As the name implies, motivation from within.
Right, so it's from you. If the motivation is from you, you're going to work harder and probably be more successful at doing what you're doing. So as a teacher, I want to develop this. I don't want to develop this. I want my students to choose tasks and to be able to accomplish things and be satisfied in accomplishing those things and be motivated in accomplishing those things and see why this is not just important for today's class or next week's class or developing English for the test, but for going beyond that. So this is where I focus my attention, mostly the intrinsic motivation, not extrinsic. And sometimes you need to carry the stick, of course. So having those strong set of class rules, which I'll talk about in a little while, is important as well. The students need to know from day one what my expectations are for them. And as long as they know what those are, we can work within that. We have some freedom. Now there are four theories. These are explained on your handout. Again, I don't spend too much time on this, but it's important. So behavioral approaches. They assume that our basic physiological needs motivate us. So hunger and thirst and those kinds of appetites, I suppose, are what motivate us. So if our students are pigeons or dogs or something, this works very well. There are teachers traditionally who believe this. I don't, but there are teachers who believe this, and then there's some students it works well. Humanistic approaches emphasizes personal choice, freedom and self-determination, striving for personal growth. And we'll talk about Maslow in a moment. Stresses the importance of intrinsic motivation. So again, the motivation comes from the students. It comes from their need, their desire. They have choices. You can satisfy this job requirement. The learning contract is an excellent example of that, right? If you want to be a C student, you have to accomplish these things. You want to be a B student, well, you do a bit more, and an A, and so on. So there are lots of ways to codify this, to create this in a document and have the students sign a contract, perhaps. Cognitive approaches, thinking. This focuses on your mind. People respond not to external events or physical conditions, like hunger, but rather to their interpretation of those events. So cognitive theorists believe that behavior is determined by our thinking, not simply by whether we have been rewarded or punished. So to go back to behaviorism. So what do the students think about what you're doing in the classroom? Do you get frequent feedback from them. I do my own feedback, typically. I do a midterm feedback and I do a final feedback. Even though the university does their own online, I do an anonymous paper. Just what do you like, what don't you like, what can I improve? Very simple. Students don't put names on it. I tell them to be honest. I don't want to hear this class is wonderful, I love it, there's nothing. No, I don't want to hear that, because that doesn't help me, right? Tell me what you like, tell me what you don't like. And I can change something, at least at the midterm. And in the final, I have to write a report to my team telling them what I did in my class. So this helps me if I can say most students liked this and didn't like this. But it's learning for me. I can only be a better teacher if they're giving me feedback, if they know they can be honest with me. And I'm not going to take it personally. So that's why I'm not using it. Social learning approaches combines behavioral and cognitive approaches, so that both the effects of outcomes and the impact of individual beliefs are taken into account. So it's seen as a product of the individual's expectations of reaching a goal and the value of that goal. So goal setting. Getting your students to sit down at the beginning of the course and say, what do I want to learn in this class? Now sometimes you get unrealistic things. I get students in writing classes who say, I want to speak more. And of course I got to say, well, we're not going to be doing that much speaking because it's a writing class. But at least this way I can counter or I can overcome that problem at the beginning and not wait until the end when they say, I didn't get enough speaking in this class, right? So they need to be realistic. The good class outline, the solid class outline, which in my case is about 4 pages, tells them what are the rules, what are the expectations, what are the week-by-week tentative, what are the week-by-week topics we're going to cover. Do we have tests? Do we have quizzes? Do we have journals? Do we have interviews? And maybe a little bit about me as well. All those things are included in my class outline, so they know what to expect. So where do you fall? Well, as I said, I'm more humanistic, perhaps, or a little bit of social learning. But different teachers, different approaches. I'm increasingly convinced that the teacher, if the teacher is passionate and believes in what they're doing and has a method that works, then 90% of the time, great students are going to follow along. I know teachers who are successful with so many different methods, but they're always passionate about those methods and passionate about what it is they're doing in the classroom. Okay, so to move on. We talked about Maslow. We have, again, Tim Murphy talked about the old Maslow. That's the one on the top. The new Maslow is interesting to me only because it tends to focus more on dating, mating, and parenting, and not education. I don't know if you've seen this, but that bottom one is actually the new revised Maslow, which to me has very little to do with education. But the concept again is, we need this before we can get this. We need to meet these needs. Students who aren't getting lunch, or aren't getting breakfast, or aren't getting loved at home are much less likely to reach that level of self-actualization and artistic and imaginative and creative development. But as a teacher, we need to know what problems they're having and why they're having problems. And knowing your students as people is absolutely essential. I keep hearing from my students time and time again, the problem I have with X teacher is he doesn't know my name. He doesn't know anything about my background. He doesn't remember that I was sick last week, or that I had this issue, or my grandmother died, or whatever the case may be. So knowing your students as people, knowing whether they're getting these things, and trying to hopefully help them along the way if they're not, as much as you can. So this is very basic, but it's very essential, I think, to motivation. Also, Bloom. This is the new Bloom. I've given you the old Bloom there, but the new Bloom is actually much better. So basically, they've changed these things. They've changed the order a little bit, and they've changed the application. So we have evaluations, judgment, synthesis, putting things together, analysis, breaking things down, critical thinking, application, using knowledge, understanding, and recall. They just changed the order there. So many of our students, when they're studying for a test or focusing on a set task, are down here. We know it, we comprehend it, we can answer the test. But that's not really application. We want to get them up here into analyzing a situation, applying this solution to another problem. I was using a site last week called whynot.com. I don't know if you've heard about it. But basically, it's a business site, again, but they have problems, social problems that are put up by various users, and they're asking for solutions. But they also have the opposite. They have solutions, and they're looking for a problem that this solution will solve. So I was doing this just to sort of push them into critical thinking, again, in my business class. So we want to push them up here. We want to get them applying, analyzing, and I think Chuck Sandy also adds something to the top here. He adds sharing, the sense of community, and getting your students working as a team. We're in Korea. We're in Asia. Asia is a group-oriented society, so pair work and group work are essential. You don't want them always focusing on the individual. And as a teacher, I don't want to be constantly calling on the individual student. So allowing your students to work as groups and have tasks within those groups. One person's a secretary, one person's the timer, one person is keeping track of who's speaking Korean and who's speaking English, these kinds of things. So those are important to develop this motivation and push them up higher. Many heads are better than one hen, obviously. I'm going to sort of skip over this one, but I've already put some examples on your handout. So one of the ways also to put Bloom into practice are these charts. So for each skill, I've only given you a couple of them, but for each skill, they have questions. For synthesis, can you design a escalator to survive in the rain or something like that? And then they have specific activities that build on these skills or develop these skills. So invent a machine to do a specific task, design a building to house your study, these kinds of things. So ways to put the theory into practice for your students are important as well, and making these realistic. Again, I don't want to spend too much time on this because it's easy to find online. So that, sorry, the taxonomy I looked at first was actually the old taxonomy, sorry. This is the new one here. So what they proposed is you switch these, create and evaluate. So synthesis becomes create, evaluation stays here, and they change these from nouns, right? Knowledge, comprehension, application. These are all nouns. They've changed them to the function. So remember something is knowledge. Understand something is comprehend. Apply something. I teach you some knowledge, now I give you another problem, apply it in that area. Apply it to that thing. Analyze, so problem solving, problem solution comes in here. To evaluate. We talked about, in my class last week, the Hanyang Festival, which the students hate, because it's basically a drunk fest, is what it is. They bring in a few famous people, they pay a whole bunch of money, they do a bunch of drinking, and that's all the festival is. So I gave them the task of analyzing and evaluating the Hanyang Festival, this is my sophomores, and had them come up with some ideas on how to make the festival more interesting. So they were suggesting things like having very famous people compete for the opportunity to come in to present or to sing at the Hanyang Festival, rather than paying them money to come and do that. Or making the Hanyang Festival competitive in other ways, making it attractive, bringing in other groups to make the festival more multicultural, for example. We have very few international food options at the festival, so they wanted to do something like that. Have the students produce food and sell it for money, those kinds of things. So it wasn't something terribly difficult for them. It was a situation they knew, but they were able to evaluate, analyze, and be creative, come up with some new ideas. So giving your students the opportunity to give input and connect their experience to what it is you're talking about is important as well. Then, last but not least, Gardner, the multiple intelligences. We all know these. We've all dealt with these. So verbal linguistic, of course, is what we're talking about. If we have a talent, we want to allow the students to develop that talent and use that talent. So how do you get to know your students as individuals? Well, give them the opportunity to share with you. I have my students in speaking, they do a self-introduction, but it's not I stand up and give you my name and tell you about myself. I have them do an interview with a partner, someone they don't know, ideally, and then they introduce the partner to us, as if they were someone with a few interesting points. And it often turns into, you know, this is my new friend Kim Min. Min doesn't have a partner. If you'd like to meet Heyman, these are Heyman's qualities. He's handsome, he's intelligent, and etc. And here's his phone number. So they often have a little bit of a sense of humor or some fun with it as well. So allowing them, even from day one, to do some different things. And it's not about their English, it's about their ability to be creative and stretch what they're doing, linguistically in other ways. So I can see how capable they are. And these ones, I don't know if you know this one. Gardner's 5 Minds, his latest. So being disciplined, mastery of, so you can read that, but anyway, mastery of key subjects, discipline, synthesizing, similar to what we're talking about in Bloom, arraying information to make sense and to sell to others, to self and others, right? Ethical, thinking towards good work and good citizenship. Scott was talking about this, and other people, the growth of companies that are community-oriented, or focusing on the good of the community and not just on making money is something that ties in nicely here. Beyond existing knowledge and synthesis to pose new questions, creating and being respectful to understand differences, which comes back to what you were talking about, cosmopolitanism and globalism. If we're not going to teach them how to respect and understand other cultures, then why are we teaching them English as a language, right? As Jack Richards has said, English is not ours anymore. It doesn't belong to native speakers anymore. It belongs to the world. It's become a world English. What's wrong with this picture?
Not enough minds?
Not enough. Okay, 5 isn't enough. We want more.
It's not plugged in.
Thank you. It's not plugged in. So guess what your job is? To plug in their minds. To plug your students in to English and into what's going on. Find ways to do that, to connect them and motivate them. Okay, so of course we have things that get in the way of this. This is what I've already talked about, so I'm going to ignore that. But it's the 2009-2011 books. Drive is the name of the book. The Science of Motivation, if you're interested. Okay, so for my students, the first thing that I do, it's on your handout, page 6. The first thing I do, first day I come in, and I introduce myself, and we go over the basic rules. And these are my rules. Nothing complicated. Number 1, be on time. Western time, not Korean time. We have discussions about that. Not as bad as it used to be. But students being late, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 20 minutes, almost every day. Ask questions. Don't be shy about asking questions. I don't have a problem answering personal questions. I don't have a problem with answering any question the student asks. If they're brave enough to ask, I'm going to answer it. But how long do you wait for a student to ask a question? The average for new teachers, what is it, do you think?
30 seconds?
30 seconds, that's actually long.
Under 10.
10, yes, 10 seconds, which is a very short time if you have a low-level class. Because what happens? You ask the question, they have to think about the question, translate the question into Korean, answer the question in Korean, translate it back into English, and then answer the question. Unless you let them talk to friends, which I don't mind doing. But 10 seconds, not going to happen in 10 seconds. So I have a colleague who actually is quite famous for this. He will ask a question the first day, and he will wait until the students answer. Sometimes it's 5 minutes, sometimes it's 10 minutes. I think it's even gone as long as 20 minutes. But he will wait until they answer. And then he says, good, that's what I want. Do that from now on, but don't wait 20 minutes. Only has to wait once. Attendance. I'm sorry, speak English. There is lots of research that shows that some use of L1, some use of Korean is okay in a language classroom, as long as it doesn't interfere with accomplishing the task. So if a student didn't understand what I was telling them, then that's fine, their friend can translate. Or if they need to find some vocabulary, I don't mind them using a dictionary or a smartphone to do that. But if I catch them text messaging, they know they're going to lose a point. So I'm monitoring that as well. Where do you text message? How do you know the student is guilty? Right? The student is up here, talking and doing whatever on his own. If he's down here, looking and sitting, then he's probably not using his phone the proper way. So body language is also a good indicator there. But do you allow students to use dictionaries? Do you allow them to use smartphones? Do you allow them to use iPads or netbooks or whatever it may be? This is becoming an issue for us. And I don't, but except for the dictionary on their cell phone. And not during exams. They can't use it during exams. Cell phones, sorry, beepers, that's old. Participation, I think that's obvious. Attendance, you come. Participation, you do things that I ask you to do. And those are 7 traits for me. And our class. I think it's important that, Urinara, Urikacho, Uri whatever, Urichip, all of these Korean concepts. This is our classroom. So even though I've made these rules, we are working as a community. Getting to know your students as people, and I have 15 students, so it's easy to do that. But getting to know your students as people, getting to know their names, getting to know what their issues are, finding out what exams they had or what assignments they had, if they were up all night last night preparing for the school festival. These are the sorts of things you need to know. And if you treat your students properly, they will share these with you and let you know. At least that's been my experience. Bring all class materials. That was an old one, but an important one. I'm having problems with that now, with textbooks and stuff. And number 6, class should be fun. Make it fun. All of my classes have that rule. Because I want English to be enjoyable. I want the classroom to be enjoyable. I want it to be fun. And I vary my activities, and I'm constantly changing things about my classes. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Yesterday we were doing an activity on, well, again, Daniel King, but he has a book on business communication, and it's called Play, is the concept. So I had all my students creating their own games yesterday, board games or whatever, didn't matter. But since it was a festival, they were all drinking games. So, maybe it was success, maybe it wasn't. But they had fun. So be clear, let your students know what you expect from them. Let them know who you are as a person, and get to know them as a person as well. Okay, I went through that fast, because that's the boring part. Any questions? Yes?
What's your advice on the use of English names?
Hate them.
So you learn their Korean name?
Yes. If they have an English name and they are absolutely, or if their name is bad, Kim Bum Suk comes to mind. I have 3 or 4 of those. I usually recommend an English name in that case. But if the name is not a problem, then absolutely, I learn the Korean names. Again, the other issue is if I have Kim Ji-young and Kim Ji-young, 2 Kim Ji-youngs, then again, I need to do something to. I had a whole class last semester where I had 2 Lee Ji-young and Lee Ji-young, so I just was called them Lee Ji-young 1 and Lee Ji-young 2. They were fine with it. But I would say don't use English names unless they require an English name and have a good reason for it. Some of them have Christian names. That's where they often use an English name. Any other questions?
So, you know, for 160 students in a language center in 18 hours a week.
Yep.
I mean, I thought of sacrificing an entire week to speak with each student for 1 minute.
Right.
But I decided not to do that. So, I mean, do you have a suggestion, or to really know them is it's not really feasible? They don't come to my office. They don't come to my office hours. I asked them to. I've thought of tying that to the grade.
Requiring them to come to your office and talk
like
to you.
once a
Yes,
semester.
that might actually, that might make them more uncomfortable.
So I don't know what to do really.
Well, I think it's an evolution. I wouldn't say that I know every student after week 1. I probably know most, in a case like that, I probably know them more by midterm than I do within the first couple of weeks, unless I use like a seating chart or name tags.
Some name tags, but I can't remember them.
Okay, well, how do you use a name tag?
On the desk like this.
And do you use it for grading or for anything like that?
Not really.
See, that's what my friend did. The friend who uses name tags, he has the name tags, he brings them with him. He doesn't give them to students.
Yeah.
And every day the students take the name tag, put it in front of them, and that way he knows, 5 name tags were not taken, these students are not present.
Yeah.
And then he also uses the name tag to make, he puts stamps or notes on the name tag as well, so that he can keep track of things. So he uses the name tag practically, and the students can look at their name tag and go, I have 3 absences and that kind of thing.
So that's still some connection. You're just saying have some personal connection.
Yes, absolutely. And it helps the students as well because they see why the name tag is important and how he's using it, and not just, I'm embarrassed because my teacher doesn't know my name.
Yeah.
Okay, any other questions? No? Okay, so now I'd like you can work with the same people you worked with before. These are some of the common problems that students have had, my students, other people's students. They're probably more appropriate to university, but a few of them, like cell phones, etc., are relevant also to public school. So please work with a group, 3 people, I would think is a good minimum, 4 is good as well, and decide what you would do with these situations. So, your best efforts, a student, despite your best efforts, a student in your class refuses to speak any English. What do you do?
So what was that one?
Number one, yes. So what do you do?
Schedule an after class meeting and try and find out why.
Okay, figure out what's going on.
Yeah, levels of interest.
Or are they just anti-foreigner? I mean, there are certain students who are anti-foreigner. It may simply be major, because in my university, I used to teach PE majors, athletes, didn't speak any English whatsoever. So it had nothing to do with attitude, they just did not study English. They didn't have any clue about English, and we had to find ways to get around this. What are your solutions? Any other solutions than private one-on-one meeting?
We had a translation to make sure they understood what they
Okay.
were meaning to do. If it's, we're assuming it's a class requirement, they speak. If it's not a class requirement, then do they speak in other classes? Maybe they don't speak. I had one child that didn't speak. Everyone said, oh, she never speaks. And apparently she doesn't talk in any classes, so.
So it wasn't, so find out what's going on in
Yeah.
other classes and with other teachers.
And then again, maybe she doesn't like you. And if that is the case, you can change classes with her or just occasionally like me. If it's just
Right.
me. Instead.
Find a way to work around it, get her to work with a peer who she likes maybe.
And we're
to-
assuming you're not expecting her to stand up and volunteer in certain classes, saying, oh, she's not volunteering now, so for the whole class, so she's not participating, she's not talking with the partner.
Right.
He, she. I think it's students, that's my point.
Of course. Well, most of us would connect this to the experience we've had. But the key point also is we don't want to take it personally, because there may be other reasons, other things going on with this student that have nothing to do with us. Right? So don't take it personally. Try and find out what the issue and what the problem is.
What did you do for your PE students?
For my PE students, I gave them a lot more freedom. I let them use dictionaries. I let them talk in Korean, and I brought them down. We were using a lot of crossword puzzles and other fun activities where they didn't have to speak as much, but I could see whether they were understanding the concepts and the ideas. So I had to find alternate methods to work with them. I should add that I was actually very fortunate in this case, because at that time, our PE students, male, were always coupled with dance students, female. And so the PE students gave us very few discipline problems because they were so busy flirting with the pretty girls in the class that they weren't too worried about giving us a hard time. So the girls were focusing on us and the PE students were focusing on them, and it somehow seemed to work just fine.
Can I just say real quick, you were mentioning a class full of ed majors. I had a class of freshmen, they were all paper engineering. It seemed like they, as a block, they tried to lower the bar, by being, non-responsive and stuff. So I had to try to sell them on warehouse, or you can get a job at this company, warehouse, where it's a paper making company. But anyway, yeah, when they're all one major and they're not interested in English, it's a challenge.
Absolutely, yes. And how you break up that clique when they're, in the good old days, yeah, it was always by major. Now we have level testing, so it's more likely you're going to get advanced students with advanced students and intermediate and so on. So some of those issues are broken down. Oh, Chinese students is the other issue we have right now. We have a lot of Chinese students, and they tend to come in either with really good English skills and very enthusiastic, or almost no English skills and just no desire to do anything. And the Korean students are just, in complete shock. They don't know how to deal with it. A student or students continuously comes late to class and or always takes 15 minutes instead of the 10-minute break everyone else's takes. What do you do?
I don't let anyone come into my class late.
So what, you lock the door? Or?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, good. Consistent policy to lock the door at 9 o'clock and nobody gets in.
Well, I don't know. Well, some of the teachers that don't have control over their students' grades, but I tell my students, you can come an hour late if you want, you're going to lose penalty points. I'm not going to beg you to come early. I tell them, it's a 10-minute period. If you're after that, you're going to get -2% from your grade. I don't want an explanation. Well, if you give me a good explanation, no worries, but yeah.
Like the subway breaks down, like we did last week.
We actually have an official policy. We actually have an official policy. If you're 15 minutes late, you're absent. 10 minutes late, you're late. And 11 absences, you fail the course.
We have 6 absences.
No, yeah, no, 6.
I try to put it on the business world. Hey, if you're employed by Samsung, Hyundai, Kia, they're not going to be happy if you're wandering in 5 minutes late.
Exactly. Every day.
Right.
Yeah.
Laying down the rules or something.
So the policy tends to solve that for me in most cases, the strictness. My policy is 5 minutes. If you're within 5 minutes, you get grace period. 10 minutes, you're late, or sorry, you're tardy, and after 10 minutes, you're absent. And if 3 tardies is an absence. So I'm pretty strict. I do give them 1 freebie, though. I'm at university, so I give them 1 free absence per term. For any reason, I don't care. I don't take points off for that. Because I figure you're human, so you can miss 1 class, as long as you make it material. A student's cell phone is constantly going off while you are trying to teach. And sometimes she actually answers the phone or makes calls during class. What do you do?
I make her leave her phone up front. No.
Oh, on the teacher's desk or whatever. Okay, fair enough.
I pick up the phone and answer it.
There you are. Scare off the boyfriend. Yes. I'm sorry, Hayden's busy right now. She'll call you back. Yeah. Any other ideas?
What did you talk in the classroom? Talk on the phone outside.
Right, go outside and talk.
Yeah, I'm at elementary school, so it's just my after school program that we've been issued for, and I said outside. 1 minute. Go. And just totally ignore it, but it is 1 minute. More than that, I do take a note down if it's going to be a problem.
Right.
And if it's going to be on the table, I can note it down, but 3 times, I'm not going to worry about it for the whole class.
And if it's a special case, if the student's never been a problem before, it happens once, then
Yeah.
obviously we're more reasonable.
Actually, like you were saying, I have, the actual elementary games on the thing or playing something else, and I'll warn it twice. 3rd time, I will take it. Before, I used to put it on my, on my desk, but sometimes they try and sneak it back. That's why I put it up on top of the blackboard. They can't reach it. I've got a chair. Even the chair, they can't.
It's usually a choice.
I got on top of the whiteboard. There's nobody can reach that. Even standing on a chair, you can't reach it.
I don't give them a choice, your bag or my desk. 3 seconds, ready to go.
Oh yeah, I got that also. Yeah.
If I see it, it's
Also.
like, yeah. That was last year. This year it's not a problem. Yes.
Yeah, well, everyone has different. In the good old days, one of my friends had he created a cardboard cell phone jail. And if this phone went off, he would basically just take the phone and put it in jail. The students love that.
They don't like you taking their cell phones, they hide it. I'm not going to have a wrestling match. I just the broken record.
Ah,
Bag or there.
bag of it.
Bag or there. That's how they do one or the other. But if they say, oh, can I use it to look up the word, not a problem. Yep, sure, go ahead.
Exactly. If they ask permission, then fine. If they have a special reason, my mother needs to call me, and okay, then fine, I'll be reasonable with that. But you got to tell me first. The other one, you can't do with smartphones, I guess. But with the old cell phones like I have, you can take the battery out. So one of my friends doesn't take the phone, he just takes out the battery and gives the battery. Then they have to track him down later. Oh, and the last one, this is the interpreter, but she likes coffee. So if the cell phone goes off, she will send the student out to get her a coffee from the coffee machine and come back. And then she brings the coffee. So only has to do it once or twice. Number 4, although the student comes on time every day, they always sit in the back and sleep through the entire lesson. What do you do?
Well, you could leave them up front.
Okay. Sleeping students sit here.
I mean, the reason why I mention that is that it happened to me personally in the 9th grade. I would sit in the back, it was a small class, so I would tilt my chair back, I would rest my head against the locker. And twice I dozed off. And eventually, the teacher moved me to the front of the class.
And you did fall asleep.
Yep, and everywhere I sit, high school, conferences, college, university, or front row center.
So you developed a good habit, basically.
Well, if I sit in the front, I'm not sleeping in the back, I'm trying to sleep back there.
Similar to that, there is no front and back in my classroom. I make a U, a horseshoe pattern.
That's a good solution. So your seating may solve that.
It's hard to hide.
I tell them to be a pro, treat this like a job, be respectful to me, to your classmates, and we pick up on that. And if you were up here teaching, you would notice that if someone was sleeping in the classroom. Just be a pro and treat it like a job.
Yeah.
But actually, on that topic, I will say this, even though I'm in elementary school, I have seen certain kids head on the desk, exhausted. But I do realize they probably were at the academy late that evening. So I realized that, as be a little bit of flexibility.
Yeah, I see them asleep and, or dozing off or something like that. Are you tired? Oh, that's sad. I'm sorry, this is English class. Please sit up. It's English time. I'm not going to let them get away with it. In my case, it's usually the lower ones. And I caught one the other day. She was talking to me to listen and repeat. You do it when we're doing it. And I've now realised she's actually quite a high-level student and she's just taking the board. It's taken me a while to work that out because she just, the whole time, finally worked out she could do it, talking with her spine. Yeah.
Cool.
I want to get it ease up a little bit, but I told her that I needed to help her friends by speaking that helps the people around her. Got it.
Well, in this case, it's in my classes, it's probably more likely that it's someone who's got a part-time job and they're up late working at a convenience store or something like that. So I would be somewhat understanding of it occasionally, but not all the time. Number 5, students go to the washroom and don't bother to come back for 30 minutes or more. What do you do?
Counts as an absence, no attendance. Our university has 10 absences and fail, and so you make sure they know how many they have.
Exactly. And it's your responsibility as a student to keep track of it. If you want to disappear for 30 minutes, then that's fine. Go ahead. And of course, if you make the occasional joke about disappearing, oh, you know, some student's gone to the bathroom again. Let's see how long he takes today. And then his friends start telling him. For the funniest case I had of this was actually, I was teaching a fashion design, I think it was a fashion design class. And it was a class like this, so there were desks and a front and a back door. And I have these 2 girls, they'd come in the front door, they'd say, hello, teacher. I'd say hello. They'd go to the back, right next to the back door. They would put their hand up, attendance. The minute the attendance was done, they would open the door and disappear. Wouldn't see them again. So it was, oh, they're gone again. Let's see, yeah.
Were they shocked when they got that?
When they come?
Were they shocked when they got a fail?
Yeah, they were, yes. Yeah, crying and everything. One of those great moments of teaching.
Like you weren't going to notice that.
Well, yeah, because I'm an idiot, right? I have 38 students and 36 are here, and I wonder who's gone. Students never bring their textbook, pen, or other necessary materials for class.
Absent.
Absent. Interesting. Okay, absent.
Books are absent. Materials are absent, so your brain runs be absent.
That's why participation and attendance are different, because you get participation but you get attendance or something.
And Tory, wasn't you or somebody else, another presentation gave, you actually told the student to go back to the dorm to get the book.
Yeah, that was after they'd done it a few times. So, yeah, okay, go get your book. When you're ready to study, come back with the book. It only took 1. Well, I mean, I can understand. When textbooks have gone up in price, I mean, some of the textbooks I teach would cost $20 or whatever, then okay, I can be somewhat sympathetic. I don't mind if you run down and photocopy the pages we're going to use today. I don't mind if you borrow, or not borrow, if you use a book with another student once, but I don't want it to be every day you're working with another student on a textbook. So if it happens once, maybe, but if it happens all the time, no, I'm not going to be flexible on that. Roll call and then disappear. I already told you that. So this is out the back. So attendance, obviously, is where you can get them on that one. Number 8, you catch some students going through your bag and looking at your attendance sheets when you return to class after break.
Going through your bag.
Going through your bag?
No.
Yes. No. What's your response?
First of all, don't leave your bag in.
Yeah, that's the first. Yeah, that's the first. Well, in the good old days, we had to carry all of our stuff between different buildings and going to different areas. So that was the issue. So in my case, this was the one that was most embarrassing. This is where I just lost my temper. I said, "I'm sorry, and this is not acceptable." And I had a senior going, "But you're freshmen." No, I don't care if you don't understand. If I went through your bag or looked through your stuff, you would be mad at me. I'm mad at you, and they apologized, and it never happened. Okay. The lovely Longiani's back telling me I have 5 minutes, so I'm going to jump over to conclusions and we wrap up. And then if you have any questions, you can ask me after. So, inspiration starts with you, not your students. You have to set the standard for your students. You have to set the expectations from day 1. As one of my supervising teachers used to tell me, he said, be tough the first half of the term. Come down hard on them. Every time someone breaks a rule, show them I'm taking the point off. Show them that I'm being consistent with my rules, and then the second half you can really ease up a little bit, because by that point they're comfortable and they know the rules. Students don't care what you know, they care whether you care. So, do you care about your students? I keep hearing about this time and time and time again. The Korean professors, other professors don't know my name. They don't know anything about me. They don't know whether I got a job, whether I don't have a job, whether I'm having a tough day, all these kinds of things. So listen to your students and let them talk to you and get to know them as people. And of course, you need to be flexible. The outdoor lesson. My students still, teacher, outdoor lesson, outdoor lesson. An outdoor lesson means we go outside and they all disappear. So what I did was, I'm also on a very hilly campus. So our department is at the top of the hill. I set up a scavenger hunt, and they had to go all over the campus to get items and different things. They had to go back to Starbucks and pick up a napkin and go get a copy of the English Journal and something else. So I would give them this list of things. They had to go out and they had to run all over campus, like for 40 minutes, and get all these things and bring them back. And then I would give them points when they brought them back. And I'd give them prizes or something. But I only had to do it once. I got to sit in the classroom, read my newspaper, and they ran all over campus getting these items. Never had a problem again with outdoor classes. So there's always a solution. Teach by example. So find ways to relate your students to your students in ways that they understand. And find ways to relate your assignments, like redesigning the Hanyang Festival was one thing that I did with them. Allowing them to relate their experience to what you're doing in the classroom, and obviously to English as well, serves as a motivation for them. Let them work, as I said, in groups, and let them work as a class. Let them feel that the class is a community and share as a community. Don't worry about making mistakes, you're going to make them. So if I make a mistake in Korean or something, I'm perfectly happy with the students correcting me, because they feel, aha, you know, teacher's human, you made a mistake. Thank you for correcting me. And I'm going to correct you when you make a mistake. So it goes both ways. Discipline to me is setting the rules, setting the standards, making sure the students know what the expectations are from day one, and being consistent with those. Making sure that you're explaining the assignments and giving the details step by step as you go through. So the carrot and the stick. Reward, give praise when it's due, and also be clear about what the punishments are. Teachers don't fail students. Students fail themselves. Day one, when I walk into the classroom, my shtick is, of course, to explain my class outline. But I always end very clearly with this. I have uncurved classes. Today, you all have A+. You can only go down. It's up to you whether you keep that A+. And, of course, it motivates them, because they want the A+. All of them want the A+. And finally, this I just thought was interesting. I was doing some editing for another organization not too long ago, and this is, I presume it's published now, but they had different qualities that students appreciated about teachers. And there were things like knowledge about their craft, or professionalism, or these kinds of things. But consistently, no matter what group it was, and they looked at Asian students, African students, and European students, I think. They didn't do North Americans. But the top rated quality for these students in schools, these were public school students, was friendliness. Is my teacher friendly? Are they approachable? Do they treat me as a person? And do I feel like I am valued as a person? So, are you friendly and caring without necessarily being a friend for your students? This may be the most important thing in some ways. Okay, my time is up. Any questions? Yes?
I'm not sure how to phrase this, but I mean, you just said everyone has an A+, right? It's up to you to maintain it.
Yep.
I mean, it seems to me when you say that 100% of the motivation is great, but I mean, is that true, or?
For some of them it may be true.
Yeah.
Not for all of my students.
But for some of them, they enjoy it and you help them along. But some people you can't help, right? They fail themselves.
The curve makes itself. I've never had a problem with any class. I've never had a class yet where they all got A+.
Right.
I had classes, probably they all deserve to get A+, but there's always someone who misses some classes, someone who doesn't do so well in some assignments, someone who does something that brings them down. But the curve generally makes itself. I have students who work towards that A+ in students. So I don't find it's demotivating. It's much better than saying you all have Fs, build yourself up to an A+.
Yeah.
So it's at the end, and by that point I've made some jokes and they've laughed. So usually they take it as a joke and you take it as being funny. But it also does make the point to some students.
Real quick, I was so huge about learning their names. I had a Korean teacher tell me, as basic as this sounds, you know, look for your kids on campus, look around for them, say hi to them. It makes a difference.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. And they're always happy when you say hello to them. Okay?
Thank you.
You're welcome.